Hey, it's Nico at Deltastring.com. Deltastring, the home of Zendesk migrations, Zendesk automations, Zendesk integrations, and Zendesk applications. We're going to be answering some questions today just about how you design processes in your Zendesk, how you build out routines, and how you prepare what you're building for developing it further in the future. So I'm at the whiteboard. Let's get down to business. So ultimately, every process is made of a number of decisions, right? And the way these are structured is you have, an input, which is the question, can we do this? Can I do that? Why is this happening with my account? How do I make your product work? What have you? And then you need some information to come in, and there's a decision that is, you tell them this, you tell them that, you do this, you do that, whatever it is, right? So that's the basic unit of a process, right? And your larger support processes, many of these in one flowchart, essentially. And your customer comes in with a query from your web form, through your chatbot, however they get in touch over the phone, and then we have to work out what is the question, and then we have to go and say what is the information we need to provide the decision, and then what's the decision, and then what's the outcome on this, right? And essentially all of your processes are built out from these components. So we're going to look at one decision and how we would develop that, how we would design that, how we'd build that, and actually how we'd improve it in the future. And so specifically, we're going to say the customer's got in touch, and we've already gone through the process of working out what their problem is, and they're asking for a refund. So let's do the old flowchart symbols, see if I can remember how those work. And it's just customer wants refund. Now, you can't give out refunds all the time. You can't give out a refund if they're happily using the product, or if they're saying it hasn't turned up and it has, and there's some other information you need, right? So there's things we need to know before a result is possible, right? There's things we need to know whether it is refundable or whether it is not refundable. There's a decision needs to be made there. So we go into one of these diamonds, right? And the question here is essentially, is it refundable? Do we refund? Which I'm going to sum up as refund. And the outcomes are yes or no. And what happens in the middle is we need to get some information in, which I think is conventionally a parallelogram from your other systems, right? And this information is going to be, is the account in good standing? If they haven't paid, you can't refund them. Have they received the product? If they have received the product and they're using it, we're going to need a return, I would imagine, right? That sort of thing, right? Is the product in transit, right? If it's on its way to them and they're saying it hasn't turned up, I need a refund, and you're saying, well, it'll be there Tuesday. That's a no, isn't it? They're not getting a refund there. They need to get the product and then, return it, what have you, right? That sort of thing. So we need the information to come in. And so let's now start to look at this in terms of Zendesk objects. So this is a ticket. And the fact of the customer wanting a refund is a value that's in a drop-down field. Now, Zendesk engineers refer to these as taggers because that's what they're called in the Zendesk API. So we have a tagger field, which is what is the inquiry, right? So it might be inquiry type, right? Now, the reason you use a tagger is because a tagger is essentially a pre-selected list of tags. And the reason you would use that rather than adding a tag is because tags are dynamic and free types, so they're easy to get wrong in different things. Use a tag, you've got a pre-select list of types. The other reason to use a tagger is because it says that these different options are mutually exclusive. It can only be one of these things. This ticket is a refund query. It is not how do I use the product query, right? So we want to deal with one thing at a time here. So we use a tagger, inquiry type refund, and then I would usually then have a conditional field within the same form from that. So if the inquiry type is refund, then we have another field revealed, which is this refund actionable, right? And then we would have three options there, right? It would be yes, no, and it would be more info needed or something, right? Like human review, what have you. My escalation, sometimes I've seen it called, right? So you then have, conditional field, which also a tagger, which essentially covers yes, no, and maybe, though I suspect you wouldn't call it maybe in your Zendesk. But you understand what I mean by this. This is a generic process, right? All of your processes are essentially going to have yes, no, and maybe options. So the information over here comes from wherever the account lives. And this could be, if you're a Shopify retailer, then it could be in there. You might need to check with your logistics partner, has the thing been delivered? Something like that. It could be your payment provider. You might need to have someone check into Stripe, Go Cardless, whoever you use for that. And so at this point, you initially are going to have a human person log into where the info is and say, what is this info? They're going to make a decision. And the way they give the decision on the ticket is they use a macro. Now, a macro in Zendesk is a pre-selected batch of actions that are manually applied. And actually, a macro can be modified before it's submitted on the ticket. When you click a macro, it doesn't submit the macro. It applies the changes and then gives you a point of making further changes before you click submit. And so for that reason, we don't send the response or take actual action from the macro. The macro simply changes this tagger here to apply the yes, no, or maybe, right? So this step is a macro where your agent chooses which one, and then the actual process of the thing happening, that's in a trigger. And the trigger is activated by this field, right, changing from no value to yes, no, or maybe, right? We should also have our maybe over here, obviously, but the maybe then is a human review where you basically have an actual person look at the information again and go back to the original question. So it's not really important to build that out right now in this demonstration. So yes, the trigger runs here, right? And the same over here, because all the macro does is change this field value. The trigger sends the reply to the customer, and you can put some liquid in there to kind of give a bit more flavor to it. So maybe you'll know, you could put some extra information in there that comes off of the information that Zendesk has about the customer. And you send that response of, hey, we're not able to refund you because of this. Or, hey, yeah, refund being actioned, have a lovely time. And that's all well and good when we're doing it manually. And when the trigger applies the yes, when you're starting out your Zendesk, it will then put it in a different view. And that view will be refunds to be actioned. And someone will periodically go down that list and action all those refunds in your payment provider, right? So then, yeah. So this goes into your view, refunds to be actioned. Then how do we improve this process? Because at the moment, a lot of these things are quite manual. And the first thing that you need to do, and this is really what we at Deltastring specialize in, is get this information into Zendesk. Get this information there. So you need a webhook or something that says what's going on over here. Maybe you use some middleware, maybe you have a custom application, whatever it is. But we need this information in Zendesk so that all the things that the decision is based on, because you need to work out what is the decision, how do the agents make the decision. They can't just be arbitrarily going, yeah, right, no, right? So we need the information. That might be checking the tracking status of the order. It might be checking the account information, the payment information, things like that. Get all that onto the ticket, right? And all these things need to be in fields. right? So automate this, and all these things need to be in fields so you can take automated actions based on them, right? And then, because we've already separated out the process of the decision, which is a macro, from the actioning of the decision, which is a trigger, we don't need to rework a lot when we improve the process. So what we're doing here when we bring this information in is we replace this macro with a trigger. 2 G's in trigger traditionally. And we replace this macro with a trigger and this macro with a trigger as well. These are separate triggers for yes and no, and it'll just be the case of, if inquiry type becomes refund, and if delivery status is not in transit, and if payment status is payment completed, etc., then action the refund, right? And then we skip this. We've taken the human out of this decision, which is more fair, more fast, more efficient, cheaper, etc. And we've bumped it over to here where the trigger actions the yes process and puts it into the view of refunds to be actioned, right? Then we have an additional point we can automate here, and that is that we don't then go into a view. We just use a webhook. We send a webhook into Stripe, Go Cardless, what have you, that is action refund by a trigger. And then we need a mop-up automation. I shouldn't be writing at 90 degrees. We have a mop-up automation because we then need to run the webhook again and check that the refund has been actioned, right? And so we check that a number of hours later because these payment processors, there can be a bit of latency, a bit of delay in them actioning some of these things. We run the mop-up automation, which then hits the webhook again and says, what's the status of this payment? And if it comes back refunded, hunky-dory, and we send another message to the customer saying, just a heads up, this has been processed and you'll see it in your account within 5 working days, right? However long it is. And if it hasn't, then it goes back to the escalation point. It goes back to your senior agent who then can log into Stripe and look at it. And then what we've done away with here is we've done away with the need for a human to make this decision because we've brought the information in. That also means your human no longer needs a second screen. They don't need to be logged into Stripe or Go Cardless or wherever your payment provider is, for example. And frankly, they probably shouldn't be. You shouldn't have your agents en masse able to look at payment details. It's a huge security risk. So bin off the agent needing a second screen, having to look at that. Bin off the agent having to make the decision because it can bring in issues, bias, mistakes, all these things. Automate that, and then we're all going to the escalation point where your senior person can check, make the changes, what have you. And then you basically do this for each of your processes that come up, and you end up with a really, really efficient and lean support team. Any questions? I think that's a pretty good place to leave it. I think we've really run over a lot of stuff there. I hope that's given you some insight into what I do day to day, whiteboarding these things with clients, and then actually building out this bit in particular, and this bit, and this bit. Those are the bits I specialize in. And we can help you with the process design, with the integrations, with the automations, with the process of doing the escalations, and save a lot of cash and make your customers happier. So I've been Nico at Deltastring.com, and hope that's useful.